I'm on good. Snatched that cork and went gone. Y'all, this popping cork is crushing it. Fred on the popping cork. This redfish just crushed it. Y'all don't use popping corks? This is why you use a popping cork right here. What a beautiful, absolutely beautiful redfish.
What's going on, Salt Strong Nation? It's Matt and the Yak, and I'm back with a tip for you guys. And this is going to be a good one because we've been getting a lot of questions lately, as I've been having a lot of really solid success with popping corks as we start getting into this fall transition season. And during this fall period, these popping corks are going to be great to use. And we've been getting some questions about the right way to rig them up. So I want to go ahead and talk about that and show you guys how I like to rig these popping corks so that you can be set up for success when you hit the water with them. So let's go ahead and jump into what you want to be using right now. All right, Salt Strong Nation, so we're here at the table and we're going to go ahead and talk about the right way to rig up a popping cork. We are going to be showing this with one of the 4 Horsemen popping cork. We do have this option available in our tackle shop at fishstrong.com, but we're going to show it all the way from your leader, which would be connected to your main line, the braid here. We're going to talk about the braid to this leader connection, all the way to the popping cork and on down to the preferred lure that you might want to use. We do have a few options here in front of us, and we're going to talk about each one of these and the different types of jig head that you may want to use on each one of these different presentations. So let's go ahead and start back up here at the top with our main line, and we'll talk about the right way to rig a popping cork. So if you guys can see really close right here, I do have my braided line. Now with my braided line right there, I do have a double uni knot. That knot is just what I tied right there as my braid leader connection right there, just because that was quick and easy for me to do, as I didn't have any tension on the other tag end of this braid. But I did use a double uni knot right there to make that connection from the main line to a piece of leader right here. Now this leader right here is super important. This piece of 6 to 8 inch 30-pound monofilament leader, I use this so that I don't get the braid twisted up around the top of the cork here. That braid can get twisted up and foul up on the top of that cork there and really just cause a big mess. But if you use a extension right there of that monofilament leader that is a bit stiffer, like that 30-pound monofilament leader that I have right here, that's going to help you reduce the risk of those hang-ups around the top of that cork right there. Now moving on down, this is the 4 Horsemen popping cork. This is in the cup shape. I've had some really solid success with this cup as well as with the oval. I've been using this cup shape a lot more in the fall. Now that I'm trying to draw a lot more attention to my bait, I will be using this cup profile a lot more in the fall, as it does have a louder sound and create more disturbance on the water. I will be looking to throw this a little bit more into the fall for sure. But that connection right there that I do have on that popping cork is a snug knot. That is not a loop knot, because I do want to maintain a secure connection to that cork right there, and that's going to be the same kind of knot that I do have right here on the bottom end of that cork. As you can see there, I do have a snug knot there as well, and that's to maintain a secure and tight connection to that leader and that cork. Now moving on down, this extension of leader right here that I have, this is going to be dependent upon the depth in which I'm fishing. The amount that I have right here is about 18 inches. That 18-inch piece of leader right there would help me accurately target that 1 foot to 18-inch depth. There was some structure in the area, probably leaning a little bit closer to that 1 foot depth, you know, as I could probably keep this on a pop and keep it moving so it would stay just above that structure. Now, as I said, the amount of leader you use will vary depending on the depth. If you're trying to fish an area that's say 3 feet deep, you could get away with a piece of leader that would be say 24 inches or even better, just depending on the depth in which you're fishing. So that leader length is subjective to the depth in which you're fishing, but it plays a big part in those strikes. Now let's go ahead and move down onto where you're using your bait right here. Let's talk about the knot that's right here on this jig head. If you look right there, you can see I do have a loop knot on that jig head. That's so that this lure can swing freely on this leader, so that when it hangs, the lure can move freely within that current, so that it'll look natural to those fish in that water. As you can see here, I do have the Fred paddle tail rigged on this. I've actually caught some really great fish, not just on the Fred paddle tail, but on that 2.0 profile size altogether. The Fred 2.0 as well as the Slam Shady and Gold Digger have all been great options for me on that 2.0 size with this trout eye jig head. So let's go ahead and talk about trout eye jig head that I have right here. You see I am missing an eye right there because this guy's had some action, but these trout eye jig heads are just perfect for this 2.0 profile size as they match up perfectly to that bait. As you can see, it comes out perfectly right there in the body of that bait, and it just comes out in such a way that it's in a great placement for where those fish are looking to strike that lure. Now that jig head size, this is a 1/8 ounce option, but that jig head size that you want to use would also depend on the depth you're fishing and the current in the water that you're fishing in that area. If you have heavy current or you're fishing deeper areas, you would definitely want to go with a heavier jig head. Heavier jig heads will help you get down in that water current or get down in that water depth a lot easier, and it's going to help allow you keep your lure in that strike zone for longer periods of time. Now, as I said, that trout eye jig head would be a great option for this 2.0 profile size. And moving right along to some other options that we have here in front of us, that 2.0 profile size would be a great option also for the Power Prawn Junior, just like we have right here in the Gold Digger option. That would be a great option as well for that trout eye jig head. It just fits that profile size perfectly, and that's a deadly combination for these popping corks. Now, moving on from these trout eye jig heads, I do want to talk about some bigger profiles on these popping corks because they do work as well. So let's talk about some bigger jig heads with some bigger profile lures. Starting off first with the Slam Shady Bomber, I do have this rigged on a redfish eye jig head. If you're going to be using these larger profile baits, it can be best to up the size of the jig head. Just as I said, this is a redfish eye jig head and it comes on a longer shank hook. That just allows for a better hook placement on that bait. As you can see, that hook comes out closer to the middle of the body, and if you were to use a trout eye jig head, it would be coming out closer toward the nose, and that could cause you to lose some hookups. So a redfish eye jig head would be optimal for one of these bomber profile baits. Now, Wyatt and Captain Hollywood both put out an amazing video about using these bombers under popping corks on a jig head. They had some really solid success on bull redfish with this exact presentation right here. We can go ahead and link that video in the description as well. If you want to find that video yourself, be sure to head over to the fishing tips page at saltstrong.com, as there's a bunch of amazing information in that video as well, along with all the other amazing information that is at our fishing tips page. Keep in mind there's a lot of fishing tips there dedicated to help you be a better angler so that you have more success when you hit the water. So as I said, that redfish eye jig head on this Slam Shady Bomber would be a great option for that 5-inch paddle tail option, and it would also be a great option as well for this Power Prawn USA Original. Now, I know I don't have it rigged up here because I wanted to show you something else with it, but I can easily go ahead and rig that up for you just to show you guys how it would be done. Now, you do have the belly slot on the bottom, but I do want to make sure this hook comes out right there in the middle of this back, so we'll measure straight through the nose there in the middle of the bait. Now we'll just push that bait down and straight and true onto it, and as soon as that bait starts to curve naturally, that's when I'll go ahead and push it out through the back, and I'll just keep pushing until that bait is snug up on that jig head, just like that. Now as you see that Power Prawn is on that redfish eye jig head perfectly, sits perfectly straight, and that hook is coming out in the middle of the body right there, so that's going to give me optimal success when I get a strike from a fish on this lure. Now, I do want to let you guys know that we do have all of these items in our tackle shop at fishstrong.com. Also, I would like to mention that almost all of these options are available in the Panhandle bundle, which is now available for all of the anglers that are in regions that are similar to the ones in which I fish. That bundle is now available at fishstrong.com as well. If you get those items in the bundle, you actually do save money on the bundle. You get a 10% discount buying it all together, and our insider members get an additional 20% on top of that. Also, if you're interested in more amazing fishing tips like this, be sure to like and subscribe so that you get notifications to more awesome fishing tips just like this one. And you can always find more awesome inshore saltwater fishing tips at saltstrong.com at our fishing tips page section. So let's go ahead and jump back into the rigging for each one of these different presentations. Now, one other thing I do want to mention is with these jerk shads like you see right here, these can be really great under these popping corks as well. But one of the things I do want to mention is that you can have some difficulty rigging them up on these hook keeps that are on these baits, because sometimes they want to split. So you do have to be very careful when rigging these up. But a hack is you could take a pair of pliers and kind of flatten those barbs out a little bit so they don't cut into the baits as much when you're pulling these baits up onto the hook. So that will just kind of reduce the risk of tearing up there around the nose point there. But these jerk shads work great as well. Can rig them up on a trout eye jig head or a redfish eye jig head. But being as there isn't much material here right here in the front nose end of these baits, I would recommend a trout eye jig head, as that would probably work best. Now, one more thing I would like to mention about using jig heads under popping corks is these jig heads are great for using artificial bait, but not just artificial bait. These jig heads are also great for using live bait like shrimp underneath them as well, because these jig heads actually help you get that bait down in that water column without using, say, a split shot. But if you are using a jig head, keep in mind that you do have to pay attention to that cork and set the hook yourself, unlike you would do with, say, a circle hook, because you would just start reeling with that and the hook does all the work for you and it sets itself. But with a jig head, if you do use, say, live shrimp underneath one of these jig heads, you will have to pay attention to that strike. But there are a couple ways to rig that shrimp on that jig head, and as you can see in the footage, I do actually rig it up a couple different ways. One of the ways I'll rig it is I will actually put the hook behind where that horn would be right there in that shrimp, and I'll come up behind the horn and I'll just dangle that shrimp right there on that jig head. Now again, I know that may not look very natural, but those fish do not mind on that shrimp. They are going to come eat that shrimp, that live shrimp, dead shrimp, doesn't matter what it is. Those fish are going to come after that bait, and they're going to eat that shrimp. And when they do, make sure you give them a chance to get all of that bait in their mouth before you go to hit it, because sometimes they want to grab the back end first. But make sure you give them enough time to go ahead and eat, get that cork all the way down, and once they do, you can go ahead and set the hook. Now, that's one way of rigging live shrimp on a jig head, and I want to go ahead and show you another one. So other than going behind the horn that's located there in the front of the head, another option of rigging shrimp is if it's live or dead shrimp, what you have the option of doing is actually removing the head. So say you remove the head from your shrimp, you can actually throw the head away, and then what you're left with is a piece of the body that essentially looks something like this. One way to rig that now dead shrimp on your jig head is another way, just like you would an artificial bait. But because you're using now dead shrimp and you've ripped the head off, the scent that comes from this now dead shrimp is a really great attractant to those fish as well. You can rig that on a jig head just like you would an artificial bait. You can put it right down the back there and push it up through that jig head, and you can essentially just push that hook out through the top of that shrimp and go ahead and push those hook keeps through the body of that shrimp. And essentially what you've created is a live shrimp jig. Now, I know this may not look pretty, but it does work on live shrimp for those fish. Now, those are some of my favorite ways to rig up these popping corks. Keep in mind, you can always get creative with it and do new things, but these popping corks are super, super productive, as you're able to see in the footage.
Oh, tarpon! I just caught a tarpon! Broke me off! I had a tarpon jump in my boat, y'all. He knocked my camera down. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. He broke me off. I had him in the boat too. Goodness gracious. Man alive, y'all.
If you want to know anything else about popping corks, we do have a bunch of more information and tips at our fishing tips page about those, so definitely head over there to check out those as well. If you have any questions about the equipment that I've used here in front of me, or you want to know more about how to rig any of these options up, be sure to let me know about that down in the comments section as well, and I'll be sure to get back to you. And as always, we appreciate you watching. And if you're new to Salt Strong, just know that we are the #1 online fishing club out there, because we actually guarantee we're going to help you catch more fish, not only with fishing tips and in-depth courses, but also our new Smart Fishing Spots app. That actually tells you exactly where the fish will be, as well as the best times of day to fish there, plus so much more. You'll also save tons of money with tackle discounts and make tons of new fishing friends in the Insider community. So thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you in the Insider community soon.